Was that within the last day or so?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. Okay.
Maybe the day before.
Yeah.
It's recent.
Today's Sunday. I had to remind myself yesterday. This is Saturday. Tomorrow's Sunday. All day. Yeah. Before I forget, if you're interested in the Zambia mission work, June gave me a flyer here. There's information. Their benefit dinner is Saturday, this Saturday, 5 o'clock for the auction and gift shop and shopping, and 6 o'clock for dinner at the Hillcrest Church. If you need more information, I'm going to give this back to June so you can have this. She has more details, but you're invited. 5 o'clock for the fun and 6 o'clock for the food. This says complimentary dinner and it's barbecue. To support African missions. What more can you want? Okay, I'm going to pass that back. I forget, again, the days run together. I forget, maybe on Tuesday, Jason Craddock came by and we were talking about doing some things for one of his classes over across the way, and he got an update from someone about Diane, and he says, I think one of the reasons that I'm here now is because the first Sunday, I think whenever classes started, he just walks across the street, because this is the church across the street, and the first person he meets is, I never met Max, Diane and Max, who took him out to lunch after church that Sunday. He came back, they found him again, said, we know you, took him out to lunch. He said 3 or 4 or 5, 6 weeks worth of Sunday lunches. And many more after that. Just remarkable. Well, I'll tell you what, I have a handout for you, but let me save that until the end. I was going to say, we'll do that. Last week, we were in Exodus 12, and I'd like to go back there briefly. The lesson today is from Exodus 15, and if you'd like to read ahead, read on into 16 and 17 for next week. I'm going to make sure here I have that. Okay. Last time I suggested not the only center of gravity, but a center of gravity, doctrinal center of gravity or theological center of gravity for the Old Testament is God's people in His presence, the people of God dwelling in the presence of God. In some ways, this is a recurring theme that goes all the way back to the beginning. In the garden, the humans and their Creator are in very close, ideal communion. God's people are in His presence. And the rest of the biblical story, the whole rest of the biblical narrative, is trying to work back to what we had at the beginning. So they are in His presence and then not. And now we got to get them back. So that's at just the epitome of the whole sweep of biblical story is the people of God in the presence of God. And so I suggested last time that this Exodus, the exiting of from Egypt, I'm going to bring my people out of Egypt so they may worship me on this mountain. We've got the people of God in the presence of God for the sake of the world. And the exiting of Israel out of Egypt is a critical movement in the storyline. And it's a critical kind of center of gravity for the Old Testament. Naomi asked, just at the right time, she was about 30 seconds ahead of me, she says, well, talk about then the Lord's Supper. We were talking about the Passover, and the Passover as just the heart of Israel's identity. They start the new year over with Passover. Remember we looked at that. This will be the beginning of months, the beginning of days for you. You'll mark time based on this event. Because we're coming out of Egypt, this is now New Year's. Everything, even the time, the way you conceive of the cycles of your life revolves around what I have done to bring you out of Egypt. She says, well, what about Lord's Supper? I said, well, the theological heartbeat for Christians is the decisive act of God and Jesus Christ, and for us it is what God has done to bring us into his presence in the work of Jesus on the cross. Crucified, buried, raised, and what the Lord's Supper does is it brings us back, and we remember this, and we mark time by it. Everything starts fresh on a Sunday. Everything starts fresh on the day of resurrection. Everything, the new life for this week begins because we have new life in him. So there's a rhythm of time, a rhythm of memory, a rhythm of practice or ritual that reminds us, that helps us remember, in a sense takes us back, even though we weren't there. But we were there. Just like Israel can sing the song that we'll see in Exodus 15, he has brought us out. And again, a little inquisitive 8-year-old me would whisper, but you weren't there. Like, true, but we were. Yeah. We weren't. I wasn't there. You're right, you weren't there. But what happened in the past has continuing significance even for me. By the way, I'm not Jewish. Neither are you. I don't know, you may be. I might be. Sniffing back in the genealogy, there's it's a possibility that we don't know who the first ice was. I mean, we know his name. We know exactly zero about him. One idea that I saw out there is he could have been Jewish. I thought, well, I didn't expect that. At some point, he makes a very Christian will. So the language in his will is very Christian. It's not Catholic, it's Protestant. This is West Virginia in he dies in the 1780s. So I don't know. You're not Jewish, neither am I. But we are part of the community of faith, and that is our past, even though that's not our genealogy. Let's ponder that for a moment. Even though that's not us, we've been brought in, and now that is us. So imagine if you're going to become a member of a family, you're adopted into the family, and you go to the family reunion, and they start to tell you stories about the family, and then you start to repeat the same stories about, well, this is just who we are. Why do you do things the way you do? Because that's who we are. And this is who we are, and this is where we came from, and these are the stories that give us meaning and us identity. These are special memories for us, and you're part of the family, so you welcome in. You know, the kids go off and get married, and they bring in the in-laws and the outlaws and all the rest of them. You bring them in, and you bring them into the family, and part of that is the stories that you tell. And again, in a sense, not my past, but in another sense, yes, indeed, that's my past. And together we retell them and we shape a future. So let me go from there to Exodus 12:12. Sorry, Exodus 12:13. Yes.
I want to explain why I requested that about the Passover.
Yes.
Someone in the class had asked me about the Passover, and we had talked, but I thought that was the perfect time to give a little more attention to that.
Very good. Yeah. Well, if you look at 12, actually it's 12:13, 12:13, 14. There's a cluster of terms. This will be a sign for you. The blood on the houses, it is a sign or a mark. This day, in verse 14, is to be a memorial for you, and you celebrate it as a festival. You are to celebrate it throughout your generations as a permanent statute. It is a sign, it is a memorial, it is a statute. So the last bit of review before we jump into chapter 15 is a sign points to something, signifies something. A memorial remembers something, and a statute defines, gives definition. Who are we? We are the people God has brought out of Egypt. So we, in a sense, we erase the time lag between the event, whenever the event happened, and wherever we are. When we say, it's us he brought out. The sign tells us what has happened. He has passed over and he has brought us out. The memorial remembers, so we don't forget. So every year, yes?
The word on down farther is sacred.
Sacred.
Sacred assembly.
Sacred assembly.
And I think we miss the sacrament part sometimes to our communion. That it is a sacrament. It is sacred. That means God has brought us together, right?
He is at
He is
work.
with us.
He is with us. He is right here with us. This is not something only in the past. It is something in the past that has ongoing significance for us today. Yes.
That has occurred to me reading Exodus is how displaced the people were. They had left home, they had left culture, they had left everything, and they were immigrants, or kind of. They were displaced, and God said, "But I'm with you, and I'm the place, and this is the place." And I just think, we forget how hard it must have been for them to be moved out of their land, but at the same time, God is taking care of every single thing. Isn't that interesting?
Well, hold that thought, because we're going to come back to that in chapter 15 in a very significant way.
Okay.
Yes?
Maybe I'm dumb, but why is yeast against the law for 7 days? And if you eat it, a bread with like yeast in it,
Yeah, the unleavened.
you'll be kicked out.
Yeah, why do you have to? Unleavened. We're not going to wait for it to rise. We're going to make the dough. We're going to make it. We're going to cook it. We're going to eat it. We're going to eat it standing up. We're going to eat it with our clothes on, with your shoes on.
No messing with the bread, just make it, eat it.
Make it and eat it, because God can act at any time. We don't have time to wait. We have to be ready to go.
Bread without yeast lasts a whole lot longer than bread with yeast. And they didn't have refrigeration to keep that good yeast roll.
Right? So there's a sense of immediacy, and there's also a sense, as I thinking through what's a helpful way to think of this in terms of the later generations who would eat. We, not us, but we, subsequent Jews after, we're not leaving Egypt in a hurry. We don't have to make unleavened bread to leave in a hurry like the first people who ate unleavened bread to leave in a hurry. So then why? Well, in a sense, that's out of the ordinary. That's extraordinary. This is different. So this is not ordinary bread. This is special. This is unleavened bread. Well, why is it special? And at that point, you're like, the reason it's special is because when we first ate this, we had to leave right now. We got to leave quick. And that gives you a way to retell why this bread is different. I don't know if that's a helpful explanation. We'll go with that, okay? All right. Yes?
That we, in reading Exodus, hear time and time again about these people falling away, but this is over a 40-year period. And I'm thinking about what you said just at the beginning, God with us. He was with them probably most of the time, but what we read about is all of their complaining and fussing, and I don't know, I'm gonna think about 40 years.
God puts up with a lot.
He's extraordinarily patient.
Well,
Maybe
they may not have been quite as bad as we get the impression that they were. Kind of, I mean, I may be the only one that feels that way, but it seems like they complained an awfully lot.
They complain an awful lot. Let me connect the thread that Judy raised and the thread that you raised. We have a displaced people. We also have, as Dad would say, an ornery people.
What kind of,
We have ornery. Ornery. Dad was from Ohio Valley, West Virginia. Ornery. Yes. Peggy knows what I'm talking about. Peggy, if you need interpretation, Peggy can provide interpretation. Ornery. Okay, there's two things going on here. They're displaced and they complain about it. It looks like the people who would have read Exodus during and after the Babylonian exile had a lot in common with not being in their own homeland and being ornery, displaced, and mad about it, complaining about it. That's a good way to describe Israel during and after the Babylonian exile, when the people of God are not in the land that God has promised for the people. So this book, telling us about how God is extraordinarily patient with his people to bring them into the land he promised, okay, that's us after the exile. That's us. So the last thing here, a sign signifies something, and a memorial remembers it, and a statute defines. So this will be a defining statute. This will be, this is 12 verse 14, permanent statute. This governs the community. Who are you? We are the people who observe Passover at the beginning of every new year because of what God has done for us and our fathers and our ancestors. So this gives the community some integrity. Who are you? We are the people who God has brought out, and this is a statute that we honor and obey and follow. Let's now jump over the page. If you're looking through 12, 13, 14, this is the narrative of the Exodus, the actual exiting. Okay, if you look at the very last paragraph of chapter 14, they walk through the sea on dry ground, and the waters like a wall on their right and left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the power of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. When Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and believed in him and in his servant Moses. Just what Moses wondered about. Will they believe me or not? Will they honor you? Okay, so the narrator brings everything kind of down and brings it, again, to use the analogy I've used before, if we're watching this act on stage, the curtain comes down as the narrator describes how they have come out. Then Moses and Israel sang this song. And our Pew Bible, I don't know if your version does the same thing. I suspect it does. If you're using the King James Version, they tend not to put poetry that's inside narrative off in poetic form. I think almost every edition of the King James will do that for Psalms, but they may or may not do that for passages like Exodus 15, which look like poetry. In fact, we know this is poetry because he says, here's the song they sing. Now, what we don't know is what it sounded like, and the rhyme and the meter and all of the things that we associate with English poetry doesn't quite translate to Hebrew. There's some of that. Not much. How does that work? That's a good question. How does Hebrew poetry work? Well, it's poetry, okay? So what we get narrated in chapter 12, 13, 14 is recast as a song in chapter 15. All right. I like the way our Pew Bible breaks up these into divisions, the major movements of the song. We'd say the stanzas of the song. They're not quite equal, but see verses 1 through 3, our Pew Bible kind of gives that a paragraph by itself. Then 4 through, 10, also 4 through 13. I'll lump 10, 11, or 11, 12, and 13 together. Then you see verses 14, 15, 16 go together, and then the end, 17, 18. All right, I think that is helpful. The opening statement, the first 3 verses, opening praise. I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. He has thrown horse and rider into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him. My Father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a warrior. The Lord is his name. That's opening praise. Right at the beginning, we already see a connection back to our ancestors. Well, the ancestors of the folks who walked out of Egypt would be Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. This would also be everyone after who would be our ancestors. So you see already at the beginning there's a connection with who God is and what he has done in the past for my fathers, for those who went before us. The short version is God was at work for me before I ever showed up. Before I came onto the scene, he was already at work for me and for you. How great is God, because he has done this wonderful thing, and this wonderful thing started way before I ever showed up. Verses 4 through 13 is basically a narration of the Exodus. We kind of go through the story. It's vivid, poetic. Things sink like a stone, like in verse 5. The wrath of God, it burns through the enemies like fire burns through stubble in verse 7. Look at that, a blast from your nostrils in verse 8. The currents stand like a dam. The depths congealed in the heart of the sea. Very vivid language, the kind that you would kind of expect with poetry. You blew your breath in verse 10, and the sea covered them. They sink like lead. So you go through the narrative, and then you read this story, and we sing through the narrative. Who is like you, glorious in holiness, revered with praises? Look at this. You've stretched out your hand, and you've done this thing. Okay, verse 14. This is interesting. So this is what we've been through. Now we, that is those of us here in this room here, we know how the story is going to continue. And I think, in some ways, so does everyone who's read Exodus, because they already know how the next stage of the story is. All right, so now we're out of Egypt, now what? All right, the people in the moment could not tell the future, so they didn't know what was ahead of them. Everyone else, they know what's next. What's next is all of the people groups that we will face when we go into the land of Canaan. So this next paragraph talks about just kind of a litany of people groups. So we're taking a bit of a step back away from what God has done in Egypt, and now we're kind of looking at geopolitical, the nations. We are one of many nations. When the peoples hear, they shudder. Anguish will seize the Philistines, the Edomites, the Moabites, the Canaanites. All these people will show up later in the narrative. They will hear of this. They will tremble. They will be in anguish. They will shudder. They'll be terrified. They'll tremble. Okay? He's shaking things up, and people all over hear about it and feel the reverberations of what God has done, Yahweh has done to bring Israel out of Egypt. Now look at this. We're shaking up the nations. What is God's attitude toward the nations? Okay, look at that next verse in verse 17. You will bring them in and plant them on the mountain of your possession. Not just Israel, we want the nations. We want to shake up the nations so that they see who Yahweh is, they hear of what He has done, and we bring them in. We want the nations to kind of say, that's our story. And we'll remember little 8-year-old me, but you weren't there. I know I wasn't there, but that's my story. We want to be the people of Yahweh who has done this great thing. Bring in the peoples. This goes right back to the promise to Abram. I will make you a great nation among all the nations for the sake of the nations, to bring all the nations in. Or to go back to Eden, to bring everything back to rights. God's people in His presence. Israel, yes. Edomites, bring them in. Egyptians, bring them in. Philistines, bring them in. All peoples. People of Israel for the sake of all people. Bring them in on the mountain of your possession. You have prepared the place for your dwelling. Lord, your hands have established the sanctuary. The Lord will reign forever and ever. It's this wonderful kind of climactic crescendo of an ending of this song. What God has done for Israel, bring in the peoples. Bring them all in this mountain. And then it ends on this kind of vertical, praise, returning everyone to, the whole world as a combined chorus. You reign forever.
You have an example in this several times of a major element in Hebrew poetry, which is repetition.
Yes.
There's one line that says something, and then the very next line says the same thing differently. You have that in verse 6.
Yes.
Your right hand, O Lord, is majestic in power. Your right hand, O Lord, shatters the enemy. And then again,
Well, it does it verse 7.
in 13, I think, in
Uh-huh.
your loving kindness you have led the people whom you have redeemed. In your strength you have guided them to your holy habitation. And then in the one you just read, verse 17, the place, O Lord, which you have made for your dwelling, the sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. That happens so often in Psalms, the book of Psalms.
It is, in fact, that is perhaps arguably the defining characteristic for Hebrew poetry is the repetition or the parallelism, where you have one thing, then you say the same thing again, and you may slightly kind of play with the vocabulary.
Variation on a theme.
Slight variation on a theme, but we'll say it and then we'll say it again. Okay? Well, as we close, the question is, for us, given the songs we sing, what do they say and how do they form us as we sing and worship?
Depends on when they were written.
Depends on when they were written. Okay? So this would be a song that Israel sings years and years after this, but what does this hymn or this song do in Exodus 15? Well, the first thing it does is it directs praise vertically to God, direct address to God. In the second place, it retells the story. And third, it invites people to come in and then go up, in a sense. It invites people who are not vertically inclined, right, who are not ordinarily, you would assume, attuned to Yahweh, God of Israel, to bring them in and properly orient them. So this gives them their story. We sing this, and we retell the story. So the question is, do the songs we sing do that? Maybe. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. Yes?
I had some times of kind of when they were really going into all of the new song kinds of things and the more modern and contemporary, missing those old hymns that really formed my theology in church because we sang them. How great thou art. Lord be with me. All of these older songs. And thankfully we use a lot of those at UCC.
We do.
And I'm grateful for that because, and I like new music, it's not that, but the depth of the story of our faith is so well written in so many of the old hymns. And I'm very biased about that.
Well, for good or ill, your music shapes you. And so, as a generative thought, what do we sing well or not? And it's not necessarily a yes or no, but it's something to think about as we go through. As I look through the order of worship for today, I see a lot of really good choices. And they're all, yes, and they're all very appropriate for the different movements in the assembly.
Yes, in Christ alone, we don't sing that enough. That's so good.
I don't know if you know, there's a committee that works quite intensely to plan songs weeks in advance. Well, we're going to have to stop because we're just going to have to stop. It's going to be time for church. Talk about the assembly. They're just going to come in and start church whether we're finished or not.
No.
But think of these things as you go through and you think about the songs. Will every song always be completely 100% perfectly appropriate? Well, no. Will some be favorites? No, of course. Well, we'll stop there.